The rain beat hard against the windshield of bus 304, the Garden Grove line, when Robert hit the brakes harder than necessary. The vehicle jolted, and among the passengers, an elderly lady lost her balance, holding onto the handrail with trembling hands. She wore simple, worn-out clothes, a beige coat patched at the elbows and a cloth bag in her hands. Her wrinkled face bore marks of suffering, but her brown eyes shone with a strange, almost prophetic light. Robert looked in the rearview mirror with impatience. Just another ordinary Tuesday, another rush, more passengers complaining. He was late. The heavy traffic irritated him, and that old woman insisted on getting on without a valid senior pass. The argument had been going on for 3 minutes, and the other passengers were starting to murmur. The lady raised her voice, firm despite her apparent fragility. "My card is expired, but I need to get to the hospital." "Please, son, it's urgent," Robert huffed, adjusting his company cap. "I can't let you ride without paying, ma'am. Rules are rules. Either you get off or you pay the fare." That's when it happened. The elderly woman slowly descended the bus steps, turned around in the pouring rain, and pointed a trembling finger at Robert. Her eyes seemed to pierce through his soul. "You'll regret this," she said, with a voice that echoed louder than the noise of the engine and the storm. 3 days. "You'll understand everything in 3 days." The passengers fell silent. A chill ran down Robert's spine, but he shook his head, slammed the door shut, and accelerated, splashing water from a puddle onto the lady who stood still on the sidewalk, soaked and alone. Before we continue, if you like emotional stories like this one, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you don't miss any new stories. Now let's get to know Robert better and see how this story will completely change his life. Robert Miller was 42 years old, with graying hair at his temples and a belly that betrayed the years spent driving while seated. He had worked as a bus driver for 15 years for Metropolitan Transit, always on the same route, always at the same time, always with the same tiring routine. He woke up at 4 in the morning, drank a cup of bitter black coffee, put on his already faded navy blue uniform, and left home before sunrise. He lived in a small apartment in the Hope Valley neighborhood, a public housing complex with thin walls where you could hear every argument from the neighbors. The apartment had 2 cramped bedrooms, a living room with an old, threadbare fabric sofa, and a kitchen where the refrigerator hummed all night long. Robert shared that space with his wife, Claudia, a woman with brown hair tied in a ponytail, who worked as a cleaner in 3 different houses, and their 17-year-old son, Gabriel, a skinny teenager with deep-set eyes, who spent the whole day glued to his phone. The relationship between Robert and his son was tense, marked by awkward silences and conversations that never went beyond monosyllables. Gabriel barely looked at his father, as if Robert were an invisible presence in his own home. During dinner, the boy would chew with his eyes fixed on the screen, completely ignoring his father's attempts at conversation. "How was school today?" Robert would try. "Fine," Gabriel would answer without looking up. Heavy silence filled the rest of the meal. Claudia would sigh, serving more rice without saying a word. She had given up on mediating the distance between father and son. In recent years, it seemed like an invisible wall had been built between them, brick by brick, unspoken word by unspoken word. Robert didn't understand what had happened. He remembered when Gabriel was little, how the boy would run to hug him when he got home from work, how they would plan to go to the park on Sundays, but something had changed. Maybe time, maybe absence, maybe the promises Robert never kept. The promises to be present, to go to his son's soccer games, to teach him to drive, to simply be there. That Tuesday, after kicking the lady off the bus, Robert went home with the scene still lingering in his mind. Her words echoed, "You'll regret this." 3 days. What nonsense. An old woman's superstition. He had followed the rules after all. It wasn't his fault if her card wasn't in order. But something bothered him. Maybe the way she looked at him. Maybe the rain falling on her as the bus drove away. Maybe the expression on the faces of the other passengers, silently judging him. Robert tried to push the thoughts away as he ate the chicken and rice Claudia had prepared. Gabriel, as always, was invisible behind his phone screen. Claudia mentioned that one of her employers had praised her work, but Robert barely paid attention, just grunted something incomprehensible. That night, he had nightmares. He dreamed of bright brown eyes, of trembling fingers pointing at him, of rain that never stopped falling. He woke up sweating at 3 in the morning, his heart racing, his shirt stuck to his body. Claudia snored beside him, oblivious to his torment. The next morning, Wednesday, Robert started his route as always. The day dawned cloudy, the heavy air carrying the smell of rain. Passengers got on and off, tired faces, lives that crossed paths for seconds before going their separate ways. Robert performed his duties mechanically, opening and closing doors, checking passes, answering questions with monosyllables. It was on the third run of the morning that something strange happened. A passenger, a woman in her 50s with dyed blonde hair, looked at Robert and frowned. "Are you okay? You look pale." Robert touched his own face. It was hot, feverish. "I'm fine," he lied. But he wasn't. A strange dizziness began to take over him. The streetlights seemed too bright, the noise of the engine too loud. He blinked several times, trying to focus his vision. Was he getting sick? During his lunch break, Robert bought a sandwich at a deli near the terminal. He sat on a park bench, worn down by time, and watched the street activity. Children played on a nearby playground, their high-pitched shrieks of joy contrasting with the heavy mood surrounding him. One of them, a girl with dark curls, fell off the swing and cried. The mother ran to help her, hugging her tenderly, kissing her scraped knee. Robert felt a tightening in his chest. When was the last time he had hugged Gabriel like that? When was the last time he had really seen his son, not just his physical presence, but truly seen him? His phone vibrated in his pocket, a message from Claudia. "Forgot to tell you, Gabriel has a presentation at school today at 6 p.m. He asked for you to go. I don't know if you can make it." Robert checked the time, 6 p.m. He could finish his shift 15 minutes early if he skipped the last loop, but that could cause problems with the supervisor. Rules were rules, after all. They always were. He typed the reply, "I'll try," but even as he wrote it, he knew he wouldn't go. There would be another opportunity. There was always another opportunity, or at least that's what he told himself. The rest of the day passed in a haze. Robert kept driving, stopping, accelerating, opening and closing doors. The dizziness persisted, but he ignored it. He had work to do, responsibilities, bills to pay. When he got home at 7, the presentation was already over. Gabriel was locked in his room. Robert tried knocking on the door. "Son, I'm sorry, work." Silence from the other side. "Gabriel, can we talk later?" More silence. Then the muffled voice of the teenager. "Whatever, whatever." Two words that hurt more than any scream. Robert rested his forehead against the cold door for a few seconds before giving up and going to the living room. Claudia was washing dishes, her back tense. She didn't say anything, but her silence spoke volumes. That night, Robert could barely sleep. The old woman's words came back obsessively. 3 days. You'll understand everything in 3 days. What nonsense. Superstition. Coincidence. He was just tired, stressed. Nothing more. On Thursday, the second day after the incident, Robert woke up with a sharp pain in his chest. It wasn't strong enough to be a heart attack, but bothersome enough to worry him. He took 2 painkillers and went to work. The supervisor, Mr. Carter, a fat man with a thin mustache and a deep voice, called him into the locker room before his shift started. "Robert, we got a complaint. A passenger said you were rude yesterday, that you ignored a request for help." Robert frowned. "Which passenger?" "Didn't give a name, but said you looked sick, pale, and that you almost hit the car in front of you because you weren't paying attention." "I was fine." Carter crossed his arms. "Are you fine today?" Robert hesitated. The pain in his chest throbbed. "Yes." "Then no problem. But pay attention. One more complaint and I'll have to take you off the route." Robert nodded, swallowing his humiliation. No problems. Always no problems. During the shift, things started to fall apart. In the middle of the morning, Robert almost ran a red light. He only realized it at the last second, braking abruptly and sending the passengers lurching forward. Curses erupted. A woman screamed that she would sue the company. A man in a suit banged his laptop against the back of the seat in front of him and shouted harsh words. Robert apologized, his hands shaking on the wheel. What was happening to him? Why couldn't he concentrate? In the early afternoon, he received another message from Claudia, this time more direct. "Gabriel asked if you'll be there tomorrow for his game. It's important. Please, don't let him down again." Again. Those 2 words carried so much weight. Again. As if Robert were a walking failure, a father who always disappointed, always failed. But when did it start? When did Robert stop being the present father and become just the tired man who lived in the same house as his son? The memory came without warning, painful and vivid. 5 years ago, Gabriel was 12. It was the final of the inter-school soccer championship, and the boy had been chosen as a starter. For weeks, Gabriel talked about nothing else. "Dad, you're coming, right? You'll be there?" The boy's eyes shone with pure hope. "Of course I'll be there, son. I wouldn't miss it for anything." But on the day of the game, Robert had to work overtime. A driver had called in sick, and Carter begged, "Just this once, Robert, I need you." And Robert agreed. After all, he needed the money. The refrigerator had broken. Claudia needed a dental procedure. The bills were piling up. When he got home that night, Gabriel was in the living room, still in his team uniform. There was mud on his cleats, a grass stain on his knee. The boy looked at his father coming through the door, and his eyes filled with tears. "We won," Gabriel said, his voice choked. "I scored the winning goal. Everyone was there. Everyone except you." Robert tried to hug him. "Son, I'm sorry. Work." Gabriel pulled away. Always work. It was the last time the boy hugged him spontaneously. It was the last time Robert saw that light of hope in his son's eyes. Something died between them that day, something Robert had never been able to resurrect. And now, 5 years later, Gabriel had stopped waiting. He had stopped asking. He had stopped trying. Robert snapped back to reality when a passenger knocked on the protective glass. "Hey, driver, you passed my stop." He had been completely distracted, driving on autopilot while drowning in memories. He apologized again and made a U-turn, ignoring the angry protests. When the shift finally ended, Robert was exhausted. Not just physically, but emotionally. He felt as if every cell in his body weighed tons. The pain in his chest had worsened, but he ignored it. Men didn't complain about pain. Men endured. He got home and found Claudia in the kitchen, stirring a pot of pasta. Steam rose in spirals, the smell of homemade tomato sauce filling the small space. She looked at her husband, and for the first time in years, Robert really saw his wife. He saw the wrinkles around her eyes, the calloused hands from so much work, the hunched posture of someone carrying the world on their shoulders. When had she gotten so tired? When had her hair gotten so many grey strands? When had that light in her gaze faded? "Are you okay?" she asked, but there was little genuine concern in her voice. It was an automatic question, like asking about the weather. "Tired," Robert replied, also automatically. They ate dinner in silence. Gabriel didn't even show up. Claudia mentioned that their son had eaten earlier and gone to his room to study. Studying or escaping his father's presence, Robert wasn't sure. After dinner, he tried to watch television but couldn't concentrate. The old woman's words echoed obsessively. 3 days. Tomorrow would be the 3rd day, Friday. What would happen? What was he supposed to understand? But before we continue and find out the ending of this emotional story, leave your like here on the video, subscribe to the channel if you aren't already, and hit the bell so you don't miss any new stories. Do you believe that sometimes we ignore people who really need our help? Have you ever been in a situation where you regretted not being kinder? Also tell me which city you're watching this video from, and I'll mark your comment with a special heart. Now, let's get back to our story and find out what happens on the 3rd day. Friday dawned with a clear sky, a striking contrast to Tuesday's storm. Robert woke up with the feeling that something was different, but he couldn't identify what. The pain in his chest had lessened, but a strange anxiety took its place. During breakfast, Claudia mentioned Gabriel's game again. "It's at 5 in the afternoon at the school field. He really wants you to go." Robert checked the time. If he finished his shift at the normal time, he wouldn't make it in time. He would have to leave early, leave 1 or 2 loops incomplete. The supervisor wouldn't like it. It could even result in a warning. "I'll try," he said, but without conviction. Claudia stopped stirring her coffee and stared at him. There was something different in her gaze, a hardness Robert didn't immediately recognize. "Robert, I can't take it anymore. He's your son. Our son. When are you going to realize you're losing him? I work to give you both the best. We don't need the best. We need you. Present. Here. Not just physically, but for real." Her words hurt more than any chest pain. Robert didn't know how to respond. He grabbed his bag and left, leaving Claudia alone in the kitchen with tears in her eyes. The shift started quietly. Robert tried to concentrate, drive attentively, not let his thoughts wander, but it was impossible. The conversation with Claudia, the old woman's words, Gabriel's expectation for the game, everything mixed into an overwhelming mental confusion. It was on the 3rd loop of the morning that it happened. An ambulance appeared behind the bus, sirens wailing, red and blue lights flashing. Robert pulled over to let it pass, watching the emergency vehicle speed by. Something tightened in his chest. Someone was in danger. Someone needed urgent help. He thought of the old lady from Tuesday. She had said she needed to get to the hospital urgently, and he had kicked her out into the rain. A passenger nearby commented loudly, "Poor thing, whoever it is. I hope they make it in time." Make it in time. 3 simple words that suddenly seemed to carry the weight of the universe. Robert continued the route, but the restlessness grew with each minute. It was in the middle of the afternoon, close to the end of his shift, when he decided to do something he had never done in 15 years on the job. He called the supervisor to ask to leave early. "Carter, I need to end my shift now. It's a family emergency." There was a pause on the other end. "What kind of emergency?" "My son. He has an important commitment, and I need to be there." Another pause. "Robert, you know that's not protocol. You have to complete the shift or find a replacement." "I know, but this time I need to." Carter sighed deeply. "All right, but you owe me one, and you'll have to make it up later." "Thank you." Robert finished the loop he was on and parked the bus in the garage 15 minutes early. His heart was racing as he ran to get his old car, a white sedan over 15 years old, parked in the employee lot. He arrived at the school at 5:10. Late, always late, but he was there. He ran to the soccer field behind the school, where the makeshift bleachers were full of parents and students. The game had already started. Robert frantically searched for Gabriel among the players on the field, and then he saw him. His son was on the bench, hunched over, elbows on his knees, face hidden in his hands, the defeated posture of someone who no longer expected anything. Robert sat in the bleachers, his heart broken. He had come, but would it be enough? Was it too late? The coach called Gabriel to play in the second half. The boy got up slowly, adjusting his uniform shirt. It was then that he looked at the bleachers, just checking, without hope, and he saw his father. Gabriel's eyes widened. For a second, just a brief second, Robert saw the 12-year-old boy again. The surprise, the joy, the hope resurfacing. Gabriel waved discreetly. Robert waved back, a smile blooming on his tired face. The boy entered the field with renewed energy. He ran like Robert had never seen before, fighting for every ball with grit, attempting every play with determination. And at 30 minutes into the second half, Gabriel received a pass at midfield, dribbled past 2 defenders, and shot hard. Goal. The bleachers exploded. Gabriel ran with his arms open, and for the first time in 5 years he pointed to his father in the bleachers. Robert stood up, shouting, crying, proud in a way he didn't know was still possible to feel. When the game ended with Gabriel's team winning, Robert ran down to the field. Gabriel ran towards him and they hugged. A tight, long hug that carried 5 years of distance, of hurt, of unspoken words. "You came," Gabriel whispered, his voice choked. "Sorry it took me so long," Robert replied, tears flowing freely. They stood there, father and son, reconnecting something that seemed lost forever. It was then that Robert looked beyond the field and saw something that made his heart almost stop. In the school parking lot there was an ambulance, and being loaded on a stretcher was the old lady he had kicked off the bus 3 days ago. Robert let go of Gabriel and ran towards the ambulance, his blood freezing in his veins. He arrived breathless near the paramedics. "What happened? Is she okay?" A young paramedic with dark hair answered without looking up. "Suicide attempt. Neighbors found her in time, but it was close." The world spun. Robert held onto the side of the ambulance so he wouldn't fall. Suicide attempt? Apparently she lost her son 3 days ago and couldn't get to the hospital in time to say goodbye. Went into a deep depression. 3 days. The old lady opened her eyes weakly and saw Robert. For a moment their gazes met. She didn't say anything, but she didn't need to. Robert understood everything. She wasn't cursing him. She was warning him. 3 days for him to understand what really mattered before it was too late. 3 days to realize that rules, work, obligations, none of that mattered when you lost what was truly precious. She had lost her son. Robert was on the verge of losing his. "You'll understand everything in 3 days," she had said. And he understood. Finally, painfully, completely understood. Robert gently placed his hand on her arm. "I'm sorry," he whispered, tears streaming. "I'm so sorry." She didn't respond, but her trembling fingers lightly touched his hand before the paramedics closed the ambulance doors. Robert stood in the parking lot, watching the ambulance drive away with its sirens on, taking that woman who had been his wake-up call. He felt a hand on his shoulder and turned. It was Gabriel. "Dad, who was that lady?" Robert took a deep breath. "Someone who taught me something very important, son. Something I should have learned a long time ago." Gabriel didn't fully understand but didn't ask more. He just stood there, next to his father, in supportive silence. That night, Robert did something he hadn't done in years. Had a real family dinner. He turned off the TV, asked Gabriel to put his phone away, and they talked. They talked about the game, about school, about dreams and fears. Claudia cried with emotion seeing husband and son finally reconnecting. Robert told them about the lady on the bus, about how he had been cruel without realizing it, about how she had given him a gift disguised as a curse, the chance to wake up before it was too late. "I've been a terrible father," he admitted, his voice breaking. "I put work, money, rules ahead of you. I thought I was doing the right thing, providing, fulfilling my duty. But I forgot to be present. I forgot to live, to love, to really see you." Gabriel held his father's hand on the table. "You came today, that's what matters." "But I was late for so many other days," Robert insisted. "I missed so many moments. I can't get that time back." Claudia touched her husband's face. "But you can enjoy the time we still have. It's not too late, Robert. It's not too late yet." In the following days, Robert looked for information about the lady. He discovered her name was Mrs. Elvira, that she lived alone in a rundown apartment in the city centre, and that her only son, Mark, had died in a work accident exactly 3 days before the bus incident. She had been going to the hospital to see her son's body for the last time, to identify him, to say goodbye. But Robert had stopped her, and when she got home alone, wet, desperate, the pain was too much. She took all the medicine she had. Fortunately, a neighbor noticed the strange silence from her apartment and called for help in time. Robert went to visit her at the hospital, where she was admitted for psychiatric observation. He brought flowers, asked for forgiveness on his knees, cried like he hadn't cried since he was a child. Mrs. Elvira looked at him with the same bright brown eyes, but this time with softness. "You understood," she said simply. "I understood," Robert confirmed. "And I will carry this lesson for the rest of my life. I didn't curse you," she explained, her voice weak. "I saw in you the same mistake my son made. He worked so much, dedicated himself so much, that he forgot to live. He died without having enjoyed life, without having spent time with me. I saw you doing the same thing 3 days. 3 days was how long it took me to understand that my son was gone. I thought maybe 3 days would be enough for you to understand that you still had time not to lose yours." Robert's tears wouldn't stop. Thank you for waking me up." Mrs. Elvira smiled sadly. "Promise me one thing? Anything. Live. For real. For yourself, for your family, and for my Mark, who didn't get that chance. I promise." In the months that followed, Robert completely transformed his life. He requested a transfer to a shorter shift, even though it meant less money. He started getting home before 6 in the evening. He had dinner with his family every day. He didn't miss any more of Gabriel's games, school presentations, the small moments that build a life. He and Claudia started dating again. They went for walks in the park on weekends, holding hands like they did when they were young. They rediscovered the joy of simply being together, without TV, without distractions, just the two of them. Gabriel flourished. The closed-off teenager started smiling more, talking, sharing his dreams. He wanted to be a veterinarian, save animals, make a difference in the world. Robert supported every step, every decision, present in a way he had never been before. And Mrs. Elvira, Robert adopted her as part of the family. She had dinner with them every Friday. She laughed at Gabriel's jokes, advised Claudia, shared stories from the past with Robert. She found a new reason to live, a new family, a new purpose. 1 year after the incident, on a sunny Tuesday afternoon, Robert was driving his bus when he saw an elderly man running after the vehicle, waving desperately. It was the last bus of the line, and the man had clearly missed his time. Robert stopped, even though he had passed the stop. He opened the door and smiled. "You can get on, sir. Watch your step." The old man got on, breathless, thanking him profusely. "Thank you, son. Thank you so much. I need to get to the hospital. My wife is admitted." Robert felt a tightening in his heart, remembering Mrs. Elvira. "Don't worry. I'll get you as close as possible. And he did. Not just close, but right at the hospital door, even though it meant a detour from the route. When the old man got off, he shook Robert's hand firmly. God bless you, son. You don't know how much this means. Robert smiled, his eyes moist. I do know, sir. I know exactly how much it means. And he did. Because now he understood that small gestures could save lives, that kindness cost nothing but was worth everything, that being present at the right moments was the greatest gift anyone could give. That night, Robert got home and found Gabriel in the living room studying for a biology test. The boy was surrounded by books, notes scattered on the sofa, his forehead furrowed in concentration. Robert sat down next to him. Is it hard? He asked. Gabriel sighed. A little. It's about stem cells and genetics. There's a lot to memorize. Robert didn't understand anything about biology, but he stayed there anyway. He asked questions, tried to help in the way he could. He was just present. And that was everything. Just that was everything. Claudia watched them from the kitchen, a soft smile on her lips. That was the husband she had married 20 years ago. That was the father Gabriel had always deserved to have. He had come back. He had finally come back. But the story of Robert and Mrs. Elvira still had one more chapter to be written. 3 months after her admission, Mrs. Elvira was completely recovered. Therapy had helped, the medication was balanced. But more than anything, the new family she had gained had given her a reason to continue. She told Robert about her son Mark in more detail. He was a civil engineer, worked building bridges and overpasses. He was brilliant, dedicated, passionate about his work, but consumed by it too. He worked 16 hours a day, weekends, holidays, always promising that when he finished that project, when he got that promotion, when he earned that bonus, he would slow down. He used to say, "Later, Mom. Soon we'll spend more time together," Mrs. Elvira recounted, her voice choked. But the later never came, and when he finally decided to take a vacation, when he finally had time, the accident happened. A beam fell. He tried to save a co-worker and ended up buried. Robert held her hand. He was a hero. He was, she agreed, wiping her tears. But I would rather have a living, present son than a dead hero. Mark saved that man, but he couldn't save himself, and I was left alone, with only memories of rushed conversations and promises of later. Those words echoed in Robert for days. He thought about how many times he had said later to Gabriel, how many laters that never came, how many promises postponed indefinitely, but not anymore, never again. Robert started writing in a small notebook all the special moments with his family. The day Gabriel scored 2 goals. The afternoon Claudia laughed so hard she cried because he tried to bake a cake and burned everything. The Friday dinner with Mrs. Elvira, where she told hilarious stories from her youth. Every precious moment recorded saved. Gabriel noticed the change in his father, and one day asked directly, "Dad, what happened to you? You're so different." Robert thought carefully before answering. They were in the car coming back from soccer practice. Night was falling, the sky tinged with orange and purple. "Son, I almost lost you," Robert began. "Not because you were leaving, but because I wasn't really here. I was physically present but emotionally absent, and a very wise person showed me that time doesn't come back, that lost moments can never be recovered. That work, money, rules, none of that matters when you lose the people you love." Gabriel was quiet, processing. Then he said, "Mrs. Elvira, it was her, wasn't it? The lady on the bus." "It was," Robert confirmed. "She lost her son and gave me the chance not to lose mine." Gabriel quickly wiped a tear. "I thought you didn't like me, that I had done something wrong." Robert's heart shattered. He immediately pulled the car over, turned to his son, and hugged him tightly. "Never. You never did anything wrong. It was me. It was always me. I was so focused on being a provider that I forgot to be a father. Forgive me?" Gabriel hugged back, crying openly now. "I already forgave you, Dad. The day you showed up at the game, I had already forgiven everything." They stayed there hugging in the parked car as the sky darkened and the first stars began to appear. 2 men, father and son, rebuilding what had almost been lost forever. The weeks turned into months. Winter gave way to spring. Life went on, but now with a different quality. Robert was no longer the bitter, distant man from before. He smiled more, laughed more, lived more. At work, Other drivers began to notice the change. "Robert, what have you been taking? You're even friendly," a colleague joked. Robert laughed. "I'm taking daily doses of presence, my friend. I recommend it." He also started being kinder to passengers. He helped elderly people get on, waited a few extra seconds when he saw someone running to catch the bus, answered questions with patience, small gestures that made a huge difference. One day, a young passenger, about 7 months pregnant, was struggling to get on the bus with several grocery bags. Robert got off, helped with the bags, held her arm as she climbed the steps. "Thank you so much," she said, breathless. "Not all drivers are so attentive." "It's the least I can do," Robert replied. "My wife went through this years ago. I know how difficult it is." Later that day, Robert received a phone call from Supervisor Carter. His heart raced. What could it be? A complaint. "Robert, can you come to my office at the end of your shift?" "Sure." When he arrived, nervous, he found Carter with a serious expression. "Sit down." Robert sat, his hands sweating. Carter opened a folder. "We've received several pieces of correspondence about you in the last few weeks." Robert's heart sank. Several complaints he was going to be fired. But then Carter smiled. "All compliments. Passengers writing to thank you for your kindness, your patience, your attention. One lady wrote 3 pages telling how you helped her get to the hospital on time. A gentleman said you saved his day when his car broke down." Robert blinked, incredulous. "Compliments?" "Compliments," Carter confirmed. "In 15 years, you never received a compliment. Now, in 2 months, you've received 12. What happened?" Robert thought of Mrs. Elvira, of her words, of the second chance he had received. "I learned to be human again." Carter studied him for a long moment. "Keep it up. The company needs more drivers like you." That night, Robert told his family about the compliments. Gabriel was proud. Claudia cried with happiness. Mrs. Elvira, who was there for Friday dinner as always, simply smiled. "You're honoring my Mark's memory," she said softly. "Living the life he couldn't live. Making the choices he didn't make. That means more to me than you can imagine." Robert held her hand. "You saved my family. Saved my life. I'll never be able to thank you enough." "You're already thanking me," she replied. "Every day, with every choice you make, you're thanking me." But life, as always, had more lessons in store. 6 months after the incident, Gabriel came home visibly upset. He locked himself in his room without talking to anyone. Robert and Claudia exchanged worried looks. Robert knocked on the door. "Son, can I come in?" Silence, then reluctantly, "Okay." Gabriel was lying on the bed, his eyes red. Robert sat on the edge. "What happened?" "I didn't get into vet school," Gabriel said, his voice breaking. "I tried so hard, studied so much, but it wasn't enough." Robert felt his son's pain as if it were his own. He wanted to say it was okay, that there were other opportunities, that it wasn't the end of the world. But instead he just hugged his son and let him cry. They stayed like that for long minutes. Then Robert said, "When I was your age, I wanted to be a pilot. I loved planes, dreamed of flying, but I didn't pass the medical exams. I had a vision problem I didn't even know about. I was devastated. I thought my life was over." Gabriel looked at him. "You never told me that." "Because for a long time I carried that as a failure. But it wasn't. It was just a redirection. I became a bus driver. And you know what? I like it. I like driving, meeting people, being part of so many people's routines. It's not flying, but it has its own beauty. But what about my dream of being a vet? It's not over. You'll just have to try again. And I'll be here for every attempt, every difficulty, every victory, because this time I'm present, and I won't let you face anything alone anymore." Gabriel hugged his father again. "Thank you, Dad, for being here." For real. In the following months, Gabriel studied with renewed determination, but this time Robert was there, helping in the way he could, asking practice test questions, making coffee during late-night study sessions, just being present. And when it was time to take the test again, Robert took the day off. He took his son to the test location, waited outside for 5 hours, and was the first person Gabriel saw when he came out. "How was it?" Robert asked. Gabriel smiled, a huge, genuine smile. "It was good, Dad. It was really good." 2 weeks later, when the results came out, Gabriel had passed. Not just passed, but placed among the top 50. The celebration was epic. Claudia made a 3-tier cake that almost collapsed but was delicious anyway. Mrs. Elvira brought champagne. Neighbors came to congratulate them. The small house was full of joy, laughter, life. Robert looked around and felt a gratitude so deep it almost hurt. That moment, that joy, that connection, had almost been lost. If it weren't for an old lady in the rain saying words that seemed like a curse but were a blessing, "You'll regret this." 3 days. He had regretted. He had regretted every lost moment, every wrong priority, every unjustified absence. But the regret had transformed him. It had woken him up. It had saved him. That night, after everyone had left, Robert and Mrs. Elvira stayed on the apartment balcony. The sky was starry. The cool night air brought the smell of flowers from the neighbor's garden. "Thank you," Robert said for the 1000th time. Mrs. Elvira smiled. "You know, when I said those words on the bus, I was so angry, in so much pain. I had just lost my son and you were cruel. I wanted you to feel a fraction of the pain I felt." Robert lowered his head, ashamed. "But," she continued, "something changed as I walked alone in the rain. I looked back and saw you driving the bus, and you know what I saw? I saw my Mark. I saw a man consumed by obligations, by rules, by a life he was living but not enjoying. And in that moment, I didn't want you to suffer anymore. I wanted you to wake up." "And I woke up," Robert said, tears streaming. "Thanks to you." "No," she corrected gently. "You woke up thanks to yourself. I just showed you the door. You chose to walk through it." They sat in comfortable silence, looking at the stars. Then Mrs. Elvira said, "My Mark didn't get that chance. He was planning that vacation, was thinking about slowing down, but time ran out before he could. You were lucky, Robert. You had time, and I'll enjoy every second of it," Robert promised. A year passed since that rainy Tuesday. Robert organized a special dinner to celebrate. Not exactly to celebrate the anniversary of something painful, but to celebrate the transformation that came from it. Everyone was there. Claudia, more beautiful than ever, with a new dress Robert had bought as a surprise. Gabriel, now a college student, radiant with stories from university. Mrs. Elvira, who had officially become the grandmother Gabriel never had. And there were more people. The old man Robert had helped get to the hospital, whose wife had recovered completely. The pregnant passenger, now with a beautiful 6-month-old baby in her arms, whom she made sure to show Robert. Some neighbors, co-workers who had become real friends. The small house was cramped, but no one minded. There was enough love to fill every inch. During dinner, Robert stood up and asked for attention. "I wanted to make a toast," he began, his voice emotional. "Exactly 1 year ago, I was an empty man. I existed, but I didn't live. I provided, but I didn't love. I was present, but not really." He looked at Mrs. Elvira. "And then a very special person came into my life in the most unlikely way. She showed me the mirror, made me see who I had become, and more importantly, gave me the chance to become who I should be." Tears were flowing freely now. "I almost lost everything, my family, my essence, my humanity, but I got a second chance, and I promise to everyone here that I will never waste it again." He raised his glass. "To second chances, to people who wake us up, to being present, to living for real." Everyone toasted, many crying, all touched. After dinner, Gabriel showed a video he had made. It was a compilation of photos and videos from the last year. Robert on the soccer field cheering. Robert and Claudia walking hand in hand in the park. Robert helping Gabriel study. Mrs. Elvira laughing at the dinner table. Simple, common moments, but absolutely extraordinary. The last image was a photo of Robert smiling, genuinely happy, with his arms around his family. Over the photo, Gabriel had written, "My father woke up," and it made all the difference. Robert couldn't hold back the tears. He hugged his son tightly, whispering, "Thank you for not giving up on me." "Never," Gabriel replied. "I'll never give up on you." That night, when everyone had left and the house was finally quiet, Robert went out to the balcony. The sky was clear, thousands of stars shining. He thought about everything that had happened, about how life can change in 3 days, about how small choices have enormous consequences. He thought of the old lady in the rain, of her words that seemed like a curse but were his salvation. He thought of Mark, the son she lost, living the life he couldn't live. "Thank you, Mark," Robert whispered to the stars. "Your sacrifice was not in vain. I'm living for both of us now." A gentle breeze blew, and Robert felt perhaps it was his imagination, perhaps it was real, a comforting presence. As if Mark were there, smiling, satisfied that his death had not been completely in vain, that it had served to save another family. Robert went back inside and found Claudia waiting for him. She held out her hand. Coming to sleep? He took her hand, intertwining his fingers with hers. Yes, I was just giving thanks. Giving thanks for what? For being alive. Truly alive. They lay down embraced, and for the first time in years, Robert slept in complete peace. No nightmares, no guilt, no regrets haunting him. Just gratitude for having woken up in time. The months kept passing. Robert kept his promise. He didn't miss any more important moments. He was there when Gabriel got his first A in college. He was there when Claudia was promoted at work. He was there at the Friday dinners with Mrs. Elvira, in conversations about nothing and everything. And at work, he continued to be the driver who helped, who waited, who cared. Not because he had to, but because he finally understood that small acts of kindness can change entire lives. One day, 2 years after the incident, Robert was driving his route when he saw, through the rearview mirror, a young driver on another bus being rude to an elderly passenger, shouting, rushing, showing impatience. Robert saw himself in that young driver. He saw who he used to be. At the end of his shift, he looked for the young man. "Can I give you some advice?" The young man, about 25, looked at him suspiciously. "What advice? I know this job is tiring. I know there's pressure, schedules, difficult passengers. But never, never let that make you forget that every person on that bus is a human being with their own story, their own pains, their own urgencies." The young man rolled his eyes. "It's just a job, old man." Robert put a hand on his shoulder. "I thought that too, for 15 years. And I almost lost everything because of it. Learn from me, it's much more than a job, it's an opportunity to make a difference every day." The young man didn't seem convinced, but Robert had planted the seed. Maybe it would grow. Maybe not. But at least he had tried. 3 years passed since that rainy Tuesday. Gabriel was in his 3rd year of vet school, doing an internship at a clinic. Claudia had started a small candy business, something she had always wanted to do. Robert continued driving his bus, but now with purpose, with joy. And Mrs. Elvira, she was stronger, happier than ever. She had found a support group for people who had lost children, where she helped others process their pain. She had transformed her tragedy into a tool to help others. "Mark would be proud of you," Robert said to her at one of the Friday dinners. She smiled, her eyes moist. "I hope so. I hope that, wherever he is, he knows that his death was not in vain, that it saved a family, that it changed lives." "It did save," Robert confirmed. "It saved mine, saved Gabriel's, saved Claudia's. You two, you and Mark, are heroes to us." That night, after Mrs. Elvira had left, Robert sat with Claudia on the balcony. It was a beautiful night. Stars shining, cool air, absolute peace. "Are you happy?" Claudia asked suddenly. Robert didn't hesitate for a second. "Happier than I thought it was possible to be." "Me too," she said, resting her head on his shoulder. "I got my husband back. Gabriel got his father back. We got our family back. And all thanks to an old lady I was cruel to," Robert said, his voice heavy with emotion. "Funny how life works, huh? My worst moment became my greatest blessing." "Because you chose to learn," Claudia observed. "Many people would have ignored the warning, continued the same. You chose to change." "I had to choose," Robert said. "The alternative was to lose everything. And I had already lost too much time." They stayed there, embraced, looking at the stars, grateful for every moment, for every second together. And so the years passed. Gabriel graduated from vet school and opened his own clinic. Claudia expanded the candy business. Robert eventually retired but continued doing volunteer work, driving vans to take elderly people to medical appointments. Mrs. Elvira lived until she was 87, surrounded by love, by family, by purpose. When her time came, she went in peace, knowing she had made a difference, that she had saved a family, that Mark's death had meant something. At her funeral, Robert gave the eulogy. "Mrs. Elvira came into my life unexpectedly and gave me the greatest gift possible. The truth that I was wasting my life, the truth that I was losing what mattered most, the truth that there was still time to change." He looked at Gabriel, now a 30-year-old man, successful, happy, fulfilled. "Because of her I didn't lose my son. Because of her I didn't lose my wife. Because of her I didn't lose myself. She saved my life by showing me how I was throwing it away." Tears flowed freely. "Thank you, Mrs. Elvira. Thank you for not cursing me that day. even though you had every right to. Thank you for giving me 3 days to understand. Thank you for teaching me to live for real." And as they left the cemetery, the sky which had been cloudy opened up, and a ray of sun illuminated the path. Robert looked up and smiled. He knew, deep in his heart, that Mrs. Elvira and Mark were together now, at peace, satisfied. Years later, when Robert was an old man with completely white hair, he wrote everything in a book. The story of how he almost lost everything, how an old lady saved him, how 3 days changed his entire life. The book became an unexpected success. Thousands of people wrote saying the story had touched them, made them look at their own lives, their own priorities. One reader wrote, "I was doing the same thing as you, putting work above family. Your book woke me up. Thank you." Another, "I lost my father because he never had time. Your book made me understand that he simply didn't know how to do differently. It helped me forgive him." And another, "I started driving a bus this year. Your book completely changed how I see my work. Now I understand that I can make a difference every day." Robert read each message with tears in his eyes. The story of Mrs. Elvira and Mark kept saving lives, even years later. Gabriel, now a father of 2, would sometimes ask, "Dad, do you regret anything?" And Robert would always answer, "I regret not waking up sooner. I regret the lost years, but I don't regret the path I took to get here. Because every mistake, every failure, every moment of pain taught me something, transformed me into who I am today." And who was he? A man who learned that work can wait, but family cannot. That rules are important, but humanity is essential. That being present isn't just physically, but emotionally, completely. A man who learned, in the most painful way possible, that sometimes the greatest blessings come disguised as curses. That sometimes we need to hit rock bottom to finally look up. That it's never too late to change as long as there is still time. A man who never forgot an old lady standing in the rain, pointing a trembling finger, saying words that changed everything. "You'll regret this. 3 days. You'll understand everything in 3 days." And he understood. Finally, completely, painfully, beautifully understood. Comment below. Presence is the greatest gift to let me know you made it to the end of this video, and I'll mark your comment with a special heart. And if the story of Robert and Mrs. Elvira moved you, I have another even more surprising one to share with you. Just click on the video that's appearing on your screen now, and I'll tell you all about it. Always remember, life passes quickly. Opportunities don't come back, but while there is time, there is a chance to start over. A big hug and see you in the next emotional story. Bye-bye.